Welcome to the Building One Story at a Time podcast.
We're your hosts. I'm Katie Herbine.
And I'm Stephanie LaChance.
Today's episode, Stephanie and I are diving into some of the differences between our home plan elevations, what to look for, and how to kind of know what you're going to be getting.
Exactly. And I will stress, if you are interested in buying an E.G. Salzfuss home or you are in the process of buying an E.G. Salzfuss home, this is the most important episode yet. So better get pumped because we are going to help you identify the one thing that you cannot change about your house after you sign up to build.
Very true. Get pumped.
Awesome. So let's start with the traditional elevation. So what can you expect when looking at the traditional elevation to be included as far as the exterior materials?
Well, I'll first start by saying that the traditional elevation is only available in select neighborhoods. This traditional elevation, depending on the home plan, you're going to have siding. The material is horizontal siding. There's no stone detail. There's no accent siding detail. Most of them do include shutters in the traditional elevation, but pay attention because it's not every single home has shutters on their traditional elevation.
Good call, Katie. And as you're looking at the home plans on the website, you click on the home plan landing page. So for example, if you're shopping in Eagles View, you're going to see all of the home plans we offer there. You'll be able to click on the Brentwood, and then there'll be a red button called View Plan Set for whichever home plan you're interested in. That is going to show you the included layout, and you want to pay special attention to that layout. And actually, if you go, it's a PDF, so you can print it or you can just look at it digitally on your machine. Down toward the bottom of that, you're going to see the elevations that are available, starting with this traditional.
Yes.
So that's going to be the best way to tell if the particular floor plan you're interested in does include any of these components or elements that we're discussing.
Yes, absolutely. Another kind of hallmark of the traditional and the classic elevation is the window grid pattern. So we include a 4/4 grid pattern on those traditional and classic elevations. So both your top sash and your bottom sash have grids in them.
All of our windows, too, are going to be single hung, so they open just from the bottom sash. That sash tilts in for easy clean, and it does include a screen.
Yes. That is one detail that does not change with your elevation, the single hung aspect of those windows. You can option double hung windows, but it's not something that's included at the base level.
Correct. Yep. And it would be a whole home double hung window package as well. So each window in your house would then be converted to double hung with full screens.
Start counting.
Yes. Yeah.
Count your windows. The next elevation, if you want to follow along, we're looking specifically at the Brentwood home plan, just to kind of, because it has a lot of those different elements that we're talking about, if you want to follow along. Then when we move to the classic elevation, you get an accent siding. Generally, there are some home plans that don't get an accent siding. They just get a little bit of a different look, maybe some stone detail. When I say it doesn't get an accent siding, I'm kind of thinking of the Glen Mary, because that is horizontal siding, specifically on the classic elevation.
Yeah.
Horizontal siding and shutters. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of a bigger porch. So some of those details to kind of just keep your eye out for, like as you're looking, it's kind of like, what's different here? Spot the differences is kind of the game that I like to play with the elevations. Spot the difference.
Yeah.
So,
the roof lines also change sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. So our classic elevations, the accent siding that's used there, if one is used, it's generally going to be a vertical. We call it board and batten siding because it has kind of like a batten look where how it overlaps each other and how they're held together.
Very popular nowadays. So generally when people think of like a farmhouse aesthetic, the board and batten is that material that comes to mind for most people.
Absolutely. And then you're going to have a little bit of stone detail. Where it is changes based on the plan. So the Brentwood, the stone detail is underneath the front porch. But on other plans, it could be on sill height underneath the front windows, something like that.
Mhm. If you wanted stone on your elevation, you would want to at least start by looking at your classic elevation.
Hmm.
Otherwise, most of our traditional elevations, they're just going to have your main horizontal siding component.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Moving to the American, I feel like this one for most home plans is a customer favorite
Yes.
elevation.
Yes. It kind of gives you the most visual interest without going to that full heritage elevation. It's going to keep your roof line generally the same. Um, the accent detail changes from a board and batten siding to a cedar shake siding. So it's not actually cedar shake, but it's meant to look like that kind of weathered in some colors, that cedar shake that you would see on like beach or cape houses.
One thing I'll mention too about the cedar shake and when you make the jump to the American elevation, so the manufacturer for our accent siding, they actually make the cedar shake in more colors. So when you go up to the American or the heritage elevation, you are going to get more choices for that accent siding than within the board and batten series.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. You will have more color choices, more ways to make your house look a little bit different than that neighbor down the street.
Mhm.
The windows change a little bit as well, the layout of them, as well as their grid pattern. So the American and the Heritage windows are going to be a 4/0. So you'll only have grids in the top sash, and then the bottom sash will be clear. It'll be a nice visual outside. You'll be able to look through that without having a grid to kind of obscure your vision.
Two more details I want to point out about the American elevation. First, being the triangular louvers for the main turned gables. Again, they vary per plan, so not always included on every American elevation. And to kind of backtrack, the louvers, they are a decorative element. So for the traditional and classic elevations, they're going to be rectangular louvers. They will be painted the same color as the whatever color trim you select for your new house. When you go to the American elevation, we move to these triangular louver details, just giving it a little bit of a different look. It kind of draws the eye up more toward that peak, makes the house look a little bit taller and emphasizes the accent siding there. And then final difference I want to point out about the American and also some heritage elevations would be the cross headers above the windows.
Listen, put that out.
So now instead of doing shutters as decorative accents for the windows, and again, this varies per plan. Some American elevations do still have shutters, but in the example of this Brentwood that Katie and I are referencing, we now introduce the cross header piece. So that's like a decorative trim piece that's like a little bit thicker. And then the windows also get the 3-inch wide trim casing instead. And again, that trim will be the same color as the exterior trim that you select for your new home.
Yeah, it's like a little hat for your windows.
Yeah, exactly. Or a little mascara.
Yeah. Just got a little glam in there. Yeah, I was going to make that same comment about the, what did you call them? Cross headers.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else you want to note about the American elevation?
You do get a little bit more stone. I don't know if we did mention that. So the stone changes. So you actually, different from the classic elevation where the stone was just under the front porch, there is no stone under the front porch. Rather, you get a large area of stone around one of your front windows and then sill height stone underneath another window. So that stone detail generally changes a little bit in the American and heritage elevations.
The stone moved on us.
Moving stone.
Moving up to the heritage elevation. So between every elevation, you'll want to pay close attention to the layout of the windows on the front of the house. In architecture, we call that fenestration. It applies to the layout of windows and doors because it does change varying on the elevation. So for this example that we're looking onto, the dining room now of this Brentwood Heritage has a triple window instead of a double window as it did in every other elevation.
Not only is it a triple window, it's also bumped out a little bit more. You can kind of tell that in the elevation because it has a little piece of roof over top of it. It actually comes as metal roof. So that's a unique detail on the Brentwood heritage, but we do offer the option to do some metal roofing on our other elevations as well. But one of the benefits of the heritage in the Brentwood particularly is you get like a little window bench seat, kind of like a little alcove there, a deeper sill.
Yeah. Again, that standing seam metal roof, that is kind of a classic Lancaster County look. And as people think of like the farmhouse aesthetic again, that's definitely one of those components that comes to mind.
Yep. And we offer it in an array of colors, but one of our favorites and can be seen on our older model home at Highland Ridge, which has now been sold, but it was a Brentwood. And then there is a buyer house actually in Parkside that has it's called Copper Penny for that accent on the standing seam metal roof. And it's just like a beautiful pop of a little bit of a brass color. It's not actually copper, so it does not tarnish.
And then I would say the most unique feature of our heritage elevations is going to be the hip roof detail. So hip roofs, they're hip, guys. Hip roofs are cool, okay? It took me some convincing, but I did some research and I was convinced. Hip roofs are kind of like a revival of like a Tudor style or like a Dutch style of like a French cottage look. And actually, if you drive around some of the older neighborhoods in Lancaster, School Lane Hills, for example, you're going to see a lot of these hip roofs. Now, one note I will say about that heritage elevation with that hip roof detail, you do lose the ability to do a cathedral ceiling in some of the owners' bedrooms, depending on the home plan. And that's just because the geometry of the roof changes. But it truly is like a unique added detail that makes your home stand apart.
It really does. It'll definitely make your home stand apart. It's one of those things that you can see from farther away. You don't have to be close to the house to notice that its roof line is a little bit different than the others down the street. So it's one way to make your house unique on the block.
Another reason that I'm a fan of hip roofs is that the roof from the front view, there's actually less of it that you're seeing. So it draws more of your attention to the other components of the house, like the cedar shake detail. Again, here on this heritage elevation, your accent siding most likely is going to be cedar shake. A couple home plans have a combination of both vertical board and batten and cedar shake on their heritage elevation. But it kind of like emphasizes everything else going on and not so much as, oh, look at that giant roof.
Yeah, like Steph said, you don't see the roof first. I actually, when I look at this elevation, the first thing that my eye goes to is the turned gables. And then those optional dormers, I think, are gorgeous, would be gorgeous to add as well.
It makes the home feel a little bit more grounded because it's almost like it has visually a stronger foundation because it doesn't look as rectangular.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, you said a stronger foundation, right? Yeah.
All of our homes will have a great, strong foundation, but visually.
Yes, your foundation does not change.
It's a little less like negative space of just being roof.
It also kind of gives it a more classic look. It doesn't look as much like new construction when you're looking at it because it has that Tudor style roof line that draws you back a little bit in time rather than the more squared off roof line. If you have questions about your elevation or the differences in elevations, drop us some comments. I definitely want to do like a listener questions.
Yes, yeah.
So feel free to drop us some questions. Maybe we'll put a poll out there about some questions and take an episode and answer them.
A few details I want to note that do not change with your choice of elevation. That would be your front door style. You will always get a solid 6-panel front door. Some home plans, like this Brentwood we're looking on to, they do include 2 side lights on either side of the front door. Another detail that will not change depending on the elevation will be your garage door style. It will be a solid raised panel garage door. And then finally, your porch posts. Again, if applicable, some home plans don't have a porch post because it doesn't need one. They will be square porch posts or columns.
Yep. I laughed because I was going to say that same thing. All right. Happy house hunting. Thank you for spending Wednesday with us.
Bye.
Bye.